Hello friends, it's nice to have you back here at Bigfoot Lake. Tonight we have 3 pretty spectacular encounters to share. So that being said, pull up a stump and let's get into our first encounter of the evening. First encounter dates back to June of 2020, and this is from Trinity County, California. The encounter begins, "Until this happened, I did not believe or accept the existence of a large bipedal animal. My husband and I are long-distance hikers and have twice spent 6 months sleeping in the wilderness in a tent, hiking from Mexico to Canada. This day we were hiking in an uninhabited Trinity County, California area. We both heard an unfamiliar animal or bird calling. I was the only one who saw anything when I looked for the source of the sound, and saw an animal licking water from the opposite bank of the creek, about 20 feet below me and about 30 feet away. No ears were visible, just a round black head. The animal sensed me and looked up. When this animal saw me, its eyes widened in fear, and its call changed to one of fear. It began running on all fours, on hands and feet with knees bent, up the steep hill, trying to stay low and hide, running first to the left, then doubling back towards the right, kind of like a Z. I am in shock, but still hiking while trying to catch a glimpse and figure out what I am seeing running on the opposite bank and mountainside. My view is partially obstructed by fir trees and debris. Suddenly, it turns uphill, goes upright on 2 legs, and is running quickly straight up the mountainside. I kept walking and now had a clear, unobstructed view of its back. It had short black hair, tall and skinny. The legs were about 4 feet long and thin, not touching the crotch. No penis or testicles were visible. Had a round head, no visible ears. It ran like a human, fast and swinging arms, all the while fearfully calling out to another one, I presume, that I couldn't see. This occurred about 1.5 miles from my home. The next 2 nights I was awakened at night by a foul smell. I know what I didn't see. This was not a bear, deer, or elk, all of which are common to the area. I spend a tremendous amount of time hiking to stay in shape, and am presently training to hike the AT in 2023. We are familiar with local wildlife and had never heard this animal before or since. After a great deal of thought, I am of the opinion that it was a young female being given the opportunity to go alone to get a drink. She was calling out her location when we heard her calls, about 6 of them. When she saw me, she was terrified and ran back to her parents, crying out the way any child would. I am a mother and instinctively recognized the cry. Her parents tracked us to our home to investigate the threat we posed to their offspring. This animal exhibited both human behaviors and emotions, but looked like an animal. The area where this occurred is located between Highway 299 to the north and Hayfork, California to the south. This area is basically 175 miles of uninhabited forest, steep terrain, some meadows and streams with elevations from 500 feet to above 6,000 feet. As a follow-up, in July of 2022, I was awakened by a foul smell, as was my sister-in-law and another nearby residence. Where I live consists of seasonally used homes. They're rarely used. The trail we were hiking on is private. one that we maintain and is only used by us. Usually we are gone in the summer months, but in 2020 we were home due to COVID. So that is the conclusion of the first encounter. I found it interesting that the possible parents or suspected parents actually tracked this lady to her home. Have you ever heard of anything like that? And do you think maybe that foul smell is what she experienced there? Let me know in the comments. So let's get right into our second encounter, and this comes from the state of Iowa. The encounter begins, I was raised in Cedar Falls, Iowa, which is located in the northeastern part of the state. I was attending Iowa State University on a track and field scholarship at the time of my encounter. It just so happened that I was back in my hometown of Cedar Falls, competing in a track meet at the University of Northern Iowa when I had my encounter. My girlfriend, Christy, at the time, had traveled from Ames to Cedar Falls to watch me compete. My parents were out of town for the weekend, and it was a spur-of-the-moment decision for us to forego the drive back to Ames and stay the night at their home. I knew where they had hidden the key in the garage, so access to the home would not be an issue. My parents had recently moved to the subdivision of Buck Ridge, which is several miles northwest of Cedar Falls. Their house was on an acre of property on the eastern side of the subdivision. Their backyard faced to the east and was bordered by a set of woods at the top of the ridge. This set of woods, if you continued straight east from the top of the ridge, would lead you down to the banks of the West Fork of the Cedar River. The north end of the property had a thin stand of trees along the border. There was also a small horse barn in that stand of trees on the northwest corner of the property. My best recollection is that the encounter took place in March of 1981. There was no snow on the ground, and being that it was early spring, there were no leaves on the trees. We pulled into the driveway about 11 p.m. I opened the garage door and proceeded to look for the key they had hidden inside a small shoebox at the back of the garage. I was disappointed to find that the key was not inside the box. I looked in several other locations inside the garage without success. I decided to see if I could work loose one of the screens in a window on the back of the house and enter the home that way. I was finding it extremely difficult to remove the window screens from the outside without bending them. So I decided to abandon that plan. We went back inside the garage and decided to rifle through some more boxes to see if I could find the key. The garage door was open, and the outdoor garage light illuminated the driveway and my car. While I was rummaging through one of the boxes, I thought I heard something growl behind me. I believed I was hearing things, so I continued to look through the box when I heard the growl again. This time it was louder, and it sounded like it was right behind me. Christy was standing directly behind me, and I turned around to find her looking over her shoulder in the direction of the growl. I asked, "Do you hear that?" She said that she did. So I grabbed a claw hammer and proceeded to walk out of the garage and onto the driveway to confront what I thought was a neighbor's dog. The growling was very deep and guttural, and it continued non-stop. It was straight in front of me at the edge where the light from the outside garage light ended and the darkness began in that line of trees on the north end of the property. It was just far enough into the darkness that I could not see it, yet it was only about 30 feet away. The driveway made a sharp left-hand turn, so I proceeded to turn left and walk further up the driveway. While I was walking, this thing was following me and continued to emit that deep, guttural growl. When I say follow, I mean it was paralleling me and was moving at the same pace I was as I walked up the driveway. It was just far enough into the darkness that I could still not see it. It continued to parallel me up the driveway. At the point where I was starting to run out of illumination from the outside garage light, I stopped walking. I was almost directly across from the horse barn I mentioned earlier and decided that I had enough and was going to confront what I still thought was a large dog. It was still about 30 feet away and growling even louder and more menacingly. I started walking towards it and raised the hammer and yelled, "Come on!" At that exact moment, this thing gave out a roar that I can only compare to that of a lion. That sound stopped me dead in my tracks. I was completely stunned. I knew that whatever this was, it was not a large dog of any kind, and I was completely outmatched. To make things worse, the roar sounded like it came from something that was much taller than my height of 6'4". I turned to see Christy looking at where the roar came from. She was obviously very frightened, and I frantically yelled, "Get in the car now!" I slowly walked backwards down the driveway toward the car. The creature was again staying at the edge of the darkness. It continued paralleling me down the driveway and growling that deep, guttural growl the entire time. I opened the driver's side door, still facing the growling creature, and I slipped into the driver's seat. I backed the car down the driveway and then put it in drive, easing past that thin stand of trees on my right, where I hoped I could see the creature with my headlights. But we saw nothing. No movement, no shadows, no outline of the creature, and unfortunately, no eye shine. We also smelled no unusual odors. Christy and I left with the garage door open and the lights on. We stayed at a seedy motel north of Cedar Falls that night and returned late that next morning to close the garage and turn off the lights before heading back to Ames. At that time I had no idea of what we had encountered. After I heard about the beast of Bray Road back in the 90s, and with the advent of the internet, all of the information we could now have to research these topics, I believe that we may have had an encounter with a dog man. I could always be wrong. We never saw the creature. Black bears, cougars, and wolves were not known to exist in that part of Iowa during that time, but my sense was that we were dealing with something that was canid. As a side note, my mother used to have a small garden just to the left of that horse barn. She told me on several occasions while she would be tilling the soil that she would find arrowheads and other Indian artifacts. I have since learned that there may be a Native American connection to these sightings of the dog man. That's my story, the best I can remember. It was like it happened yesterday and was life-changing. It set me on a course of exploration and research about the paranormal and other earth mysteries that I think I would not enjoy today if I had not experienced that terrifying encounter at Buck Ridge. So what do you guys think of that one? Think that was a possible dog man encounter at this Buck Ridge? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are of that one. So let's get right into our third encounter of the night. And this one comes from the state of Illinois. I live near Lincoln, Illinois. Lincoln is pretty centrally located in Illinois. It is 30 miles from the state capital, Springfield, 35 miles each from Bloomington, Peoria, and Decatur. It has a population of about 12,000 or so. I am now 50 years old, but when I was a little boy, me and my family had an encounter with the Salt Creek Monster. If you live in central Illinois, that is pronounced crick not creek. At that time, we lived out in the country, less than a quarter mile from Salt Creek. This was 2 miles outside an extremely small little village, Kenny, Illinois. My mother witnessed it cross the road right before the bridge that crossed Salt Creek. My brothers had been down there that night fishing and placed out night lines. My mom drove down to the bridge to get the boys and tell them to get back up to the house. It was almost 10 p.m. and they weren't going to be allowed to stay out there all night. One of my brothers told my mom they had seen Bigfoot. Her, not believing them, told them, "Well, you two boys get in the car and come on home." They told her they had to gather their fishing poles and gear and to please wait while they got it, and they would walk back up to the house. She agreed and waited while they did that and started back down the road. One of my brothers was on foot and one on his bike. As they took off, she drove on toward the bridge to turn around on a little gravel drive right before the bridge. She had her driver's side window down, and as she got to the drive, a horrible smell of garbage mixed with rotten sewage water practically smacked her in the face through the window. In the headlights, a 6-foot-plus tall man-shaped thing crossed in the headlights from one side of the road to the other. It was light gray and completely hair-covered. It looked directly at the car as it passed by. She said she'll never forget those glowing yellow eyes. She said that the hair on her arms, neck, and head all stood on end, and she's never felt that scared since. She turned into the drive on the right side of the road and slammed the gear shift into reverse, quickly doing a 3-point turn to go back, away from the bridge, and back up on the road to the house. As she went toward the house, this thing was running down the road. It was a full moon that night. The boys had been looking back, and they went to see where Mom was, and they saw this huge, muscular, man-shaped thing running in their direction. They later said they looked back because this thing must have weighed a lot, because they felt it running on the paved country road before they saw it. My brother that was on foot was scared so bad he passed my other brother on his bicycle running. Mom was freaked out because it looked like it was going after the boys. She swerved over at the creature, and it jumped off the right side of the road, down 15 feet into the deep ditch, and let out a blood-curdling scream. Everyone got up to the house quickly, went in, and locked all the doors and windows. They later said they could hear it walking around the house. It was thudding into the ground and breathing loudly as it went by windows. My sister and her best friend were sleeping out in a camper that fit into the bed of a pickup truck. They heard something walk up to the camper and circle it 5 to 6 times. They could hear deep, heavy breathing, and the dog that was scared of nothing was under the truck whining. It slapped the side of the camper and rattled the doorknob. The two of those girls stayed completely still and even held their breath. They were trying to be so quiet. After what seemed like forever, but in reality was probably 30 to 40 minutes, they finally heard whatever it was. They never looked out the window to see, but something thud off in the direction of Salt Creek. Sometime later, they heard something off in the distance in that same direction that they heard the thing thud, that only moments before had been circling their camper, screeching loudly. So that is the conclusion of our third and final encounter. Have you guys heard of this Salt Creek monster before? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Let me know any thoughts you have on all 3 of the encounters. Appreciate you hanging out with us a bit for some story time here at Bigfoot Lake. We appreciate all of you, and Hopefully we'll see you next time as we get together again here at Bigfoot Lake. Have a great night.